Have you ever felt like you're living on a different timeline than everyone else? Not slower, not behind, just out of sync. You watch others move confidently into careers, relationships, identities, while something inside you hesitates. Not from fear, from something deeper. A quiet knowing that choosing too fast means choosing wrong. If that resonates with you, even slightly, Carl Jung had a name for what you're experiencing. He called it late individuation, and he believed it was the signature of the rarest personality type, a type that is not designed for early success, but for lasting emergence. In this video, I'll walk you through the 7 stages this personality moves through, from early misunderstanding to eventual inevitable rise. And by the end, you may finally understand why your delay was never a flaw. It was preparation. From the very beginning, there is something different about this personality. Not superior, not inferior, just misaligned with the world's tempo. As children, they are often described as too quiet, too intense, or strangely mature. They ask questions that don't fit their age. They feel emotions before they have words for them. They watch while others play. Teachers notice them, but don't know what to do with them. Parents worry, not because something is wrong, but because something is unusual. Jung observed this pattern across hundreds of cases. He wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But here's what he understood that most people miss. Some personalities cannot become themselves quickly. Their inner world is too vast, too complex, too alive. While most children build identity by absorbing the external world, copying values, imitating behaviors, adopting goals, this personality does something different. They resist, not consciously, not rebelliously. Their psyche simply refuses false alignment. A woman I'll call Elena once described her childhood this way. "I always felt like I was watching life through glass. Everyone else seemed to know the rules of a game I couldn't see. I wasn't sad exactly. I was just somewhere else." She remembers sitting in classrooms, listening to teachers explain what success looked like, what a good life meant, what she should want. And even at 8 years old, something in her quietly disagreed. She couldn't articulate it. She just felt it. A subtle wrongness, like wearing shoes that don't quite fit. She spent years believing something was wrong with her. Therapists, self-help books, endless attempts to fix what she thought was broken. Only decades later did she realize nothing was wrong. She was simply built for a different timeline. And this is where the first paradox appears, because while these individuals seem mature inside, they often appear delayed outside. Systems that reward speed punish them. Structures that demand conformity confuse them. Peers who adapt easily outpace them, or so it appears. Jung believed this early friction was not accidental. It was necessary. The psyche was protecting something that needed time to form, something that couldn't be rushed without being damaged. Think of it this way. Some trees grow fast. They shoot up quickly, provide shade early, look impressive in their first years. But their wood is soft. Their roots are shallow. When the first real storm comes, they fall. Other trees grow slowly. For years, nothing seems to be happening above ground. But beneath the surface, roots are spreading deep into the earth, finding water sources others will never reach, building a foundation that can hold weight. The rare personality is the slow-growing tree, and the world keeps asking why they're not taller yet. Here's what makes this personality fundamentally different from most people. Their inner world is unusually vivid. Thoughts, symbols, emotions, intuitions, all colliding at once. Jung would describe this as a psyche where the unconscious is highly active. Dreams feel significant, patterns appear everywhere, meaning demands to be found in everything. This sounds like a gift, and eventually, it is. But early in life, it creates a specific problem. When the inner world is louder than the outer one, adaptation becomes almost impossible. From a neurological perspective, research on highly sensitive and deeply reflective individuals shows increased activity in the prefrontal cortex and insula, areas associated with deep processing, emotional awareness, and pattern recognition. These individuals don't just experience life, they process it at multiple levels simultaneously. This isn't a disorder, it's a cognitive style. But it's a style that doesn't match systems designed for speed, repetition, and surface-level engagement. The modern world rewards quick decisions. It rewards confidence even when that confidence is unfounded. It rewards people who can commit without overthinking, act without overfeeling, move without pausing to ask whether the direction is right. The rare personality cannot do this. Every decision passes through layers of analysis. Every commitment requires genuine alignment. Every path must feel true before they can walk it. So what happens? They hesitate. Career paths. Others choose easily feel impossible to commit to. Relationships that seem normal feel suffocating. Beliefs that satisfy others feel hollow. A man named Daniel shared that in his 20s, he changed directions 7 times. Different jobs, different cities, different versions of himself. His family called him lost. His friends stopped asking what he did for work. At family gatherings, he learned to dread the question, "So what are you up to these days?" He tried everything: sales, teaching, startups, graduate school. Each time he'd begin with hope, commit with effort, and then feel something slowly dying inside him. Not because the work was hard, because the work was wrong. His soul knew it even when his mind tried to argue otherwise, but Daniel wasn't lost. He was searching. His psyche was rejecting every false path until it found a true one. Looking back now in his 40s, he understands. Each abandoned path taught him something. Each wrong turn clarified what right would feel like. The wandering wasn't wasted. It was reconnaissance. Jung warned that forcing such individuals into premature identities causes what he called lifelong neurosis, the fracturing that happens when someone lives a life that doesn't belong to them. He saw it in his patients constantly. Successful people by external measures, utterly broken inside. They had achieved everything society told them to want, and they felt nothing but emptiness. So the rare personality unconsciously resists early success. Not because they can't achieve it, because their soul knows it would cost too much. The psyche is intelligent. It knows when a victory would actually be a defeat. It knows when climbing a ladder would only take you further from where you need to be. So it creates friction. It manufactures doubt. It refuses to let you commit to what would ultimately harm you. This protection feels like sabotage, but it's actually wisdom. In their 20s, the contrast becomes painful. Others are advancing: promotions, marriages, social status, confidence. Instagram feeds full of achievements and milestones. The rare personality watches and feels something heavy settle in their chest. Why can't I just do what they do? What's wrong with me? They may jump from path to path. They may retreat into isolation. They may appear unambitious, confused, even broken. Society has very little patience for people who don't fit the timeline. By 25, you should know what you want. By 30, you should be building it. By 35, you should have arrived somewhere recognizable. The rare personality looks at this schedule and feels like they're reading instructions for someone else's life. But Jung would say something crucial here. This is not stagnation. This is incubation. Think of a seed buried in dark soil. From above, nothing is happening. The surface is still. But beneath that surface, roots are forming. Structure is building. Life is preparing for an emergence that the surface cannot yet show. The rare personality is doing something invisible during these lost years. While others are constructing external structures, careers, networks, identities, they are constructing internal structure. They are asking questions most people postpone until midlife. Who am I, really? Beneath the expectations, beneath the conditioning, beneath what I was told to want. Who is actually here? What is authentic versus performed? Which parts of my personality are truly mine, and which did I borrow to survive? What part of me is shadow? What have I hidden from myself because it was too uncomfortable to face? What have I inherited from others that was never mine to carry? These questions slow you down, but they save you later. Psychological research on late bloomers consistently finds one pattern. Those who delay major life commitments often report higher life satisfaction and lower rates of midlife crisis later. Why? Because they didn't build on unexamined foundations. They didn't construct a life on top of assumptions they never questioned. When the existential earthquake comes, and it always comes, their structure doesn't collapse. Jung observed that many people who succeed early collapse inwardly later. The midlife crisis, the depression, the sudden emptiness. These are symptoms of a life lived without true individuation. They climbed the ladder efficiently, only to discover it was leaning against the wrong wall. The rare personality pays the price early so they don't pay it later. They experience their crisis of meaning in their 20s and 30s, when there's still time to rebuild, when there's still flexibility, when starting over is difficult but not devastating. Jung wrote, "The first half of life is devoted to forming a healthy ego. The second half is going inward and letting go of it. But what if someone does both at once? What if their early failure is the inward work?" That's exactly what happens with this personality. Their delay isn't delay. It's a different sequence. They're doing the second half work during the first half. And that means their second half becomes something most people never experience at all. Before we continue, I want to try something. In the comments, share what age you are right now, and one word that describes where you feel you are on this journey. No explanation needed, just the number and the word. 32, searching. 45, arriving. 28, waiting. Whatever feels true. Because naming your stage is part of recognizing it, and sometimes seeing others at different points on the same path reminds you that you're not alone in this. Now, let's talk about what happens next, because this is where it gets harder before it gets clearer. Loneliness is not an accident for this personality. It is almost inevitable. Their inner complexity makes shallow connection unsatisfying. Small talk feels exhausting. Social performances feel absurd. They crave depth in a world optimized for surface. They walk into a party and feel more alone than they did at home. They sit in meetings surrounded by colleagues and feel like they're behind glass. They go on dates and realize within minutes that the other person cannot see them. Not really. Not the parts that matter. So they often feel alien, even among friends. Invisible in groups. Unreachable in intimacy. This isn't antisocial. It's a surface. They are not opposed to connection. They are incapable of pretending that shallow connection is enough. This loneliness typically peaks in the late 20s or early 30s, and this is the most dangerous point. Many rare personalities break here. They numb themselves with distraction, endless scrolling, binge-watching, substances, anything to avoid the silence. They conform to stop the pain, taking the normal job, dating the normal person, performing the normal life. They abandon the self that was forming inside them because the cost of protecting it feels too high. Jung warned that betraying the emerging self creates a lifelong shadow, resentment, bitterness, quiet self-hatred that never fully heals. You can see it in certain people's eyes, a deadness, a giving up that happened so long ago they don't even remember making the choice. A woman named Sophia told me she almost gave up at 31. She was exhausted from feeling different, exhausted from explanations that never quite landed, exhausted from watching others glide through life while she struggled with every step. So she surrendered. She took a job she hated because it was stable. She dated someone who didn't see her because he was available. She tried to become normal. It lasted 8 months. Then something in her cracked. Not broke. Cracked open. She was sitting in her apartment one Sunday evening, preparing for another week of performing a life that wasn't hers, and she felt something rise up in her chest. Not anger exactly, more like a refusal, a deep cellular no. She realized she would rather be lonely and authentic than surrounded and invisible. That was 6 years ago. Today she runs a small practice helping others through the same transition. Not because she planned to, because her path finally caught up with who she'd always been. The years of wandering had built something, sensitivity, depth, understanding, that became her gift. Here's what Jung understood about this stage. Those who endure the loneliness without surrendering undergo something crucial: ego dissolution. They stop defining themselves by external validation. They stop measuring their worth by others' timelines. They stop chasing approval from people who cannot see them anyway. They begin listening inwardly. They develop a relationship with themselves that doesn't depend on reflection from others. They become, in a sense, their own companion. This is when the true transformation begins, but it is still invisible. From the outside, nothing has changed. They might even look worse, more withdrawn, less social, less successful by conventional measures. But inside, a foundation is being laid that will hold everything that comes later. Because they fail early, the rare personality becomes intimate with their shadow: doubt, envy, anger, fear, inferiority, all the parts of themselves they were taught to hide. Most people repress these, push them down, pretend they don't exist, build elaborate psychological structures to avoid ever looking at them directly. The rare personality cannot afford that luxury. Their failures have made the shadow visible. They have no choice but to look at it. When you don't succeed, you can't pretend you're above envy. When you don't fit in, you can't pretend you're above loneliness. When you don't achieve, you can't pretend you're above self-doubt. The shadow shows itself because there's no success to hide behind. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This is exactly what happens during the lost years, not by choice but by necessity. They analyze their darkness, they question their motives, they wrestle with contradictions. Why do I envy people I don't even respect? Why do I sabotage things I want? Why do I feel like a fraud when I succeed and relieved when I fail? Why do I push away the people who try to love me? These questions are uncomfortable. Most people spend their entire lives avoiding them, but the rare personality sits with them. Not because they're brave, though they are, but because they have nowhere else to go. This internal confrontation is exhausting. There are days when they feel like they're dismantling themselves piece by piece. There are nights when they wonder if anything solid will remain. But it creates something that cannot be built any other way: depth. Psychological research shows that individuals who engage in what's called self-complexity work, actively examining contradictory parts of themselves, develop greater emotional resilience and more stable self-concept over time. They don't break under pressure because they've already faced the worst thing, themselves. When you've looked at your own capacity for pettiness, cruelty, and selfishness, really looked without flinching, external criticism loses its power. What can anyone say about you that you haven't already confronted? What accusation can land when you've already done the audit yourself? Jung believed that only those who integrate their shadow can wield real power later in life. Power without shadow integration becomes tyranny. Think of leaders who project their unexamined darkness onto others, creating enemies to destroy rather than facing what's within. Success without shadow integration becomes addiction. Think of achievers who can never stop, never rest, because stopping would mean facing what they're running from. Influence without shadow integration becomes collapse. Think of public figures whose hidden contradictions eventually destroy everything they built. This is why the rare personality matures slowly but solidly. They don't build on denial, they build on truth. Think of it like constructing a building. Most people pour a quick foundation and build fast. It looks impressive early. The structure rises quickly. People admire the progress. But when storms come, cracks appear. When earthquakes hit, walls fall. The speed that looked like efficiency was actually recklessness. The rare personality spends years on the foundation alone. Nothing visible is happening. From the outside, it looks like they're doing nothing at all. But when they finally build, it stands. Toward the mid-30s or early 40s, something changes. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but unmistakably. Clarity begins replacing anxiety. Self-trust begins replacing comparison. Depth begins replacing urgency. They stop asking who they should be. They start embodying who they are. The questions that used to torture them begin answering themselves. Not through logic, but through lived experience. They've tried enough wrong paths to recognize the right one by feel. They've worn enough masks to know their real face when they see it. Jung called this stage the birth of the true self. He wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And because this self is not borrowed, not copied from parents, not performed for approval, not constructed from social expectations, it carries a different kind of power. Their voice becomes calm, not because they've suppressed their fire, but because they no longer need volume to be heard. Their decisions become precise, not because they've gained certainty, but because they've lost fear of being wrong. Their presence becomes unmistakable. People notice when they enter a room, not because they demand attention, but because they've stopped trying to avoid it. A man named Marcus described it this way: "At 42, I finally stopped trying, not in a defeated way. I just stopped performing. I stopped curating myself for consumption. And strangely, that's when everything started working. People began listening to me differently. Opportunities appeared that actually fit. It was like life had been waiting for me to stop pretending." He told me about a business meeting where he simply spoke his mind, without calculation, without strategy, without trying to impress anyone. He said what he actually thought. He disagreed when he disagreed. He admitted uncertainty when he felt uncertain. He expected pushback. Instead, he got respect. The room shifted toward him. Afterward, the CEO asked to speak with him privately. Within a year, his career had transformed. Not because he became someone different, because he finally stopped hiding who he'd always been. Here's what actually shifts during emergence. First, they become psychologically unbribable. When your identity is no longer dependent on external approval, criticism cannot destabilize you. Praise cannot intoxicate you. You become very difficult to manipulate. This is threatening to systems that depend on manipulation. Bosses who control through fear, relationships built on guilt, social structures that demand conformity. They all lose their power over someone who doesn't need their approval. Second, they stop fearing judgment, not because they become arrogant, but because judgment loses relevance. They've already faced their shadow. They've already confronted their worst qualities. What can anyone say that they haven't already worked through? When someone criticizes them now, they can actually hear it. They can evaluate whether it's true. They can integrate what's useful and release what isn't. They don't collapse into shame or rise into defensiveness. They just consider. Third, their ambition becomes surgical. They no longer chase everything. They pursue only what aligns with who they've become. Waste disappears. Energy consolidates. Movements become economical. They might do less than they did in their 20s, but everything they do lands. Nothing is scattered. Nothing is desperate. Every action comes from center. Research on what psychologists call self-actualized individuals, those who score highest on measures of psychological integration and authenticity, shows a consistent pattern. Most reach this state between 35 and 55, not earlier. The rare personality isn't behind. They're right on time for a different kind of success. If you're feeling something shift as you watch this, even something small, take a moment to like this video, not for the algorithm, for yourself, as a quiet marker that you recognized something true about your own path. And if you know someone who's been feeling behind, someone who might need to hear that their delay isn't failure, send them this video. Sometimes one reframe changes everything. By the time the rare personality reaches the second half of life, something remarkable has happened. The game that trapped everyone else has lost its grip on them. Status no longer seduces. They've seen too clearly that status is a hungry ghost, always wanting more, never satisfied, never finished. Approval no longer directs. They've learned that chasing approval means living as a reflection rather than a source. Fear no longer rushes. They've faced enough fears to know that most of them were phantoms. And the real ones? They've survived those too. This is what Jung called psychological maturity, and he believed very few people ever reach it. He wrote, "The greatest and most important problems of life are all fundamentally insoluble. They can never be solved, but only outgrown. The rare personality has outgrown the problems that still consume most people, not because they're superior, because they did the work. They did the work when it was invisible. They did the work when no one was watching. They did the work when it felt pointless, when it seemed like everyone else was racing ahead while they stood still. In daily life, this integration reveals itself through small but unmistakable signs. They're no longer shaken by things that once destabilized them. Bad news arrives and they absorb it without fragmenting. Conflict arises and they engage without losing themselves. Uncertainty appears and they move through it without panic. They no longer seek validation from anyone. This doesn't mean they're isolated or indifferent. They still value connection, still appreciate recognition, but they don't need it to know their own worth. The validation comes from within now. It's not a hope, it's a fact. They communicate more gently, decide more wisely, act more slowly but more surely. There's no rush anymore because they're not trying to prove anything. There's no edge anymore because they're not defending anything. There's just presence, full, grounded, available. Imagine a lake after a storm. When the wind finally stops, the surface becomes still. And in that stillness, the water reflects the sky more clearly than ever before. The peace after the final test is the same. When the inside becomes calm, life reflects that clarity. Opportunities appear that match who you've become. Relationships form with people who can actually see you. Work emerges that uses everything you've developed. Not because you manifested it or attracted it or any of that. Simply because a unified self naturally draws unified circumstances. A woman named Clara, now 58, described her experience this way. I wasted so many years thinking I was broken because I couldn't keep up. I compared myself constantly. I felt ashamed of my path, my pace, my apparent failures. Now I realize I was never supposed to keep up. I was supposed to go deep. And the depth I found, the self-knowledge, the integration, the peace, it's worth more than anything I could have achieved by rushing. She paused and then added something I'll never forget. The people who rushed past me? Many of them are in crisis now. Divorces, burnouts, depressions. They built fast and now they're rebuilding. I built slow, and I'm just living. Here is what Jung understood that changes everything. The rare personality does not succeed despite their delay. They succeed because of it. The isolation taught self-reliance. They learned to be their own companion, their own counsel, their own source of validation. The confusion taught discernment. They developed the ability to sense truth from falseness, alignment from misalignment, right paths from wrong ones. The failure taught truth. They learned that they could survive not succeeding, which freed them from the desperate need to succeed at all costs. The shadow taught power. They integrated their darkness, which means it can no longer control them from beneath. They have access to their full energy now, not just the parts they found acceptable. None of it was wasted. It was all preparation. And when they finally rise, it is not dramatic. It is inevitable. It happens the way dawn happens, not all at once, not with fanfare, but gradually, steadily, until suddenly it's undeniably day. And everyone who was watching the horizon wonders how they missed the transition. If you've reached the end of this video, you may already feel something subtle but real, a quiet recognition. A sense that your story makes more sense than it did when you started watching. No one hands you confirmation that you're on the right path. No one tells you that your delay was actually preparation. No certificate arrives. No authority pronounces you ready. But the shift in how you see your own life, the way the failures suddenly look like lessons, the way the loneliness suddenly looks like depth, the way the delay suddenly looks like wisdom, that is the clearest confirmation there is. You're not behind. You never were. You were simply building something that couldn't be rushed, a self that couldn't be borrowed, a life that couldn't be imitated. Jung believed the rarest personality represents psychological evolution itself, a human being who refuses to sacrifice soul for speed or truth for approval. If that resonates with you, you're not alone. There are others on this path, quiet ones, deep ones who felt broken until they realized they were just built different. Subscribe to stay with us on this journey. These videos are not for everyone. They're for those walking the long road of depth, individuation, and self-mastery. Your journey is not ending. It is just beginning to make sense. And that beginning, after all this time, is exactly on schedule.